Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. So I'm going to talk about our work. So we do quite a lot of work in bioinformatics training across the country. Talk actually more about our work in training in pathogen surveillance for public health. So we have a number of different challenges when we are trying to train in public health. So we know that when we train in academia, we have academics who are sitting in an academic setting. They have access to a lot of trainers, long-term mentors, faculty, and long-term support. But in public health, these are staff members who are busy all day, every day. They have full-time jobs. They don't have a huge amount of time to step out. They don't have faculty nearby, or sometimes even a single person in the institute who understands bioinformatics that can support them. In many cases, they come from very different educational backgrounds, and so they're having to learn some foundational skills from scratch. And when we train, there's obviously you want to train in person, so there's a limited number of trainees you can include on that. And then it's this long-term support. When you finish the training, what happens to them afterwards? We try to actually, some of our training, because our training is quite popular, we have academics coming too. So you have this mix of audiences that have very different outcomes. One is using data for pathogen surveillance and real-time kind of tracking. The other group are using it for research. So these staff are really busy, so we have to adapt to that. So the project that I'm talking about is funded by the Gates Foundation, and it's called the NGS Academy. And our remit there was so we work with the Public Health Alliance for Genomic Epidemiology. That's the epidemiology equivalent of GA4GH. And there we have done a landscaping analysis to look at what are the major gaps in pathogen surveillance or public health training. So we're busy working on a paper on that, looking at gap analysis. We have also got a big mandate to obviously build capacity in genomics. And so that capacity is a combination of different kinds of training. And I'll talk about some of the different training modalities we have. But we also have to build the infrastructure to support training. So we have the infrastructure, but the institutions, the public health institutes, don't necessarily have that. And then I'll talk a bit about the pathogen surveillance training curriculum that we've developed. So our strategy was really to say, what are the gaps? What do people need? What are their job descriptions? What do they not have to be able to carry out those jobs? And then how do we develop and implement a training plan that really considers each different audience and their job as opposed to an academic career? So if we looked at the different personas. So we've run training courses for these different groups. So we've got the wet lab group, we've got the genomics researchers, epidemiologists, the bioinformaticians, and then we actually also have to train the public health officials and policymakers. So when we started, we got the grant at the end of 2019, and of course, everybody started focusing on SARS-CoV-2, so we were building curricula for that. We had to do a lot of that training online initially because nobody could move. We had all the lockdowns. So we had to teach wet lab through videos, which we managed. And then we were able to start thinking about how do we train the bioinformaticians. So we looked at kind of the foundational skills that people need so that we could then teach the SARS-CoV-2 bioinformatics workflow. And then we also wanted to do additional training in foundational skills because now they've got to run these workflows, but nobody's set up the HPC at the institutions. They don't have sysadmins to actually set up the workflows and the computational infrastructure they need. For the public health officials, of course, they're busy people. They're not going to come to training. So for them, we had to do webinars in different languages and have interactive sort of discussions with them so that they could understand what is genetic epidemiology, what is NGS, and how do I interpret the data, and how do I act on it. So we started off with, during COVID, with virtual classrooms. And then beyond COVID, we obviously were able to do face-to-face training. So we started expanding this to containers and workflows, and then responding to other things like malaria, monkeypox, antimicrobial resistance. So we use these different formats. So for our SARS training, we were really equipping the national, and these were brand new public health institutes that had never done NGS before. So it's not like this, the US CDC, which everything was set up and they had to train people. This was starting the laboratory from scratch. So we had to equip everything. The Africa CDC equipped them all, and then we had to, do the training to go with it. And then we also, when we started doing the containers and workflows to build the capacity in the bioinformaticians, we then focused more on building a community of practice. So we had the same training in the same institution in Kenya for 3 or 4 years in a row where we built on the skills. And we started off with introductory workflows and containers, and then now they are fully advanced, and they were able to train other people. So we have a full-on ongoing community of practice in that. And then we had this rapid response stuff. So monkeypox came out. We suddenly had to have training courses in this in person, including wet lab, the full workflow from the wet lab all the way to the bioinformatics. So it's a rapid response as opposed to in parallel developing kind of a sane proper training program. So we've managed to train over 300 people, and these are just the different courses that we've run, and reasonable set of about 45% female trainees in that. But we covered quite a vast area of the continent, and these are areas where the Africa CDC had actually put in NGS infrastructure. And then, of course, we had to put in the training infrastructure. So we used REDCap. We used REDCap for monitoring the trainees and then monitoring the course evaluations. And then the African Society for Laboratory Medicine, they've got their own training platform for assessments. And I'll come back to that. And everything we do, we put online. So all our training materials are open access. We try to make them all fair. They're available on YouTube and the NGS Academy website. So the other thing is, what about long-term support? I've mentioned this a little bit briefly. So when people go back to their public health institutes, they don't have anybody to support them afterwards. So we have a Slack group for every single course that we run, but what we ended up doing was actually creating a trainer-trainee database. So in the trainer database, all the trainers in public health or different areas of epidemiology can come in, they can create a profile that says, this is my area of expertise, how many hours I've trained in there, so you can get a good level of the experience in that, and it's all categorized. So there we have this database of trainers, and then the trainees come in through the help desk and submit a ticket to say, okay, I've been on this course, but I'm having troubleshooting this particular workflow. They can submit a ticket, and when they choose that category, it goes to all of those trainers who can then chat in the background and say, you answer, I'm too busy. And then they actually provide an answer. And so you can see the answer from the trainer perspective and then the trainee perspective. And then we're building this knowledge base so that they can actually do this. And we're hoping that this will enable kind of organic bringing together of people to start having a mentee relationship. And these can be from people from very different parts of the world. So the other thing we were asked to do actually by the Africa CDC was to build a standardized curriculum. And the reason for this is that the Africa CDC, loads of people coming saying, I can run a course for you on this and this and this. And they didn't know how to standardize that. If someone was running courses in West Africa, how did they know that the people in East Africa who were getting training from somebody else was getting the same kind of training at the same level? And so decided to build a standard curriculum so that they could track this, and then people could use this to decide what should be covered in different courses. And then, of course, we needed a way to assess the skills and knowledge coming out of those courses of that curriculum. So the aim was to really have a global kind of pathogen surveillance for public health curriculum where we could standardize the topic, the content, the depth, so the level and the kind of contact time, and then how you assess the skills afterwards. So it was a very collaborative process. We looked at the different persona for the different audiences that we wanted. We worked with the Africa CDC on the topics. We had a big curriculum meeting at the Africa CDC in Addis, and got all experts who were routinely running pathogen surveillance to input. And then we've had online meetings, and everybody sort of input, reviewed, and updated that. And then now we're busy working on mapping this to existing training, to existing courses. So the idea of once this curriculum is, complete, is that you have your set of persona. If you're, for example, a bioinformatics scientist, we've divided it into foundational skills and then applied skills. So the foundational skills are in either wet lab or bioinformatics or generic stuff. And then the applied skills would be in a particular type of pathogen, viral, bacterial, etc. And then you can be more specific, tuberculosis, vectors, SARS, etc. So the bioinformatician would need foundational skills. And then if they're working specifically on bacterial pathogens, they'll take those modules. So it's very modular. The wet lab scientists will take their foundational skills and then the wet lab associated courses for whatever pathogen they're working on. So the foundational modules we have are generic. This is for everybody, any kind of audience. There's the wet lab one specifically, how to make solutions, how to set up your lab, etc. And then there's the bioinformatics foundational skills as well. And then for the pathogen specific ones, we've got viral, fungal, bacterial, malaria, which includes vectors, So it includes the parasite and the mosquito surveillance, other parasites, and then we've also got wastewater surveillance, which we're working on, and we're working now on an AI course, and then obviously metagenomics generally. So this is what it looks like. So we have all of these packaged into these PDFs. So this is the high-level kind of document PDF for each of those 3 generic courses. And then for a collection, so the course collection would be, in this case, the generic courses. The diagram is to show you, how this module fits into what you do on a day-to-day basis. So why you need to understand sample selection, study design, why you need to understand ethics, general epidemiology, introduction to NGS, etc. So there's one PDF that describes the overall course collection. And then for bioinformatics, foundational modules include all sorts of aspects of foundational programming, Unix, Linux, HPC, analytical skills, and then also things like data curation. So we make sure we've got data curation and submission, ontologies, reporting to policymakers and public health officials. So a module itself would look like this. So we've got, this is one of the bioinformatics foundational courses. So it gives you an overview. So basically who's it targeted to, what is the indicative content, contact time, so the depth of the course, and then sort of an overview, obviously the contributors, an overview, and then the indicative content, and then learning outcomes and module assessments. So I'll come back to the assessments. We've also tried to make sure that these are translated into different languages. So we're still working on this. We've actually been assessing different AI tools for different languages. And annoyingly, they work differently. So because we actually have the native language speaker to test them. So one tool works best for Arabic, another tool works for Swahili, and yet another tool works best for French. So we just have to kind of combine different tools. But we're working on this, and so we can easily plug in different languages into this curriculum. So we make sure that, as I said before, that we wanted to have some sort of assessment as well. So there are 2 ways to assess things. Obviously, for the basic, overviews, we can just have quizzes because you're testing knowledge. So we've actually used AI, but also experts to come in and generate a list of questions. So we don't provide the questions freely available, or the curriculums available on the website, but we don't provide the questions available because we don't want the participants to all learn the questions and the answers. But they're available for the trainers if they want them. So what we've done is we've put them into the ASLM platform, but they can be plugged into anything. So in the ASLM platform, we've got all the, it's not moving there. Okay, it's not moving there. But you can believe me that in the ASLM platform, we have the modules, and for each module, it's got a set of quizzes. And then whoever's doing it can decide whether they want a 65% pass rate or whatever pass rate. So when somebody comes to, when somebody says, oh, I know that module already, their boss can say, okay, you go through the test and we'll test whether you actually know that or not. So these assessments are there, and you can do randomization of the questions, and that's so that people can, come back. And so that's all set up, and anybody can do that on their system. And then we also have, for things like bioinformatics, we'll have practical exercises that can't be done in Mark automatically. And so these will be on a different system. But they use basically particular practice data sets, so you can actually test that somebody understands how to write code or run a particular workflow. And then for wet lab, we've also got some wet lab tests so that they can actually go. So instead of just testing the knowledge, you can also test the skills. Okay, and it's still not moving. Yeah, I'm trying to follow. But it's okay. So you can find the curriculum on the website that you can't see, but you can see it later. So we've got a website where you can actually search by the audience, and then it gives you the list of modules that's relevant to them, or you can search by the type of course. So I want to just find all the modules on viral pathogens, and then it lists all of those. So the next steps are to think about accreditation for this, to finish some of these modules, finish the translation, and then actually map to training, actual training materials. So the question, the main issue is that there's still a lot to do. So what do? What everybody at this conference does, use AI. So one of our new Gates-funded projects is to actually use AI for all aspects of training. So this includes, you'll have to listen to me. Basically, things like, so we've actually created, we're using AI to create a chatbot. So for if you don't get answers on your help desk quick enough, you can actually go onto a chatbot. So we're teaching the system with all of the pathogen surveillance kind of materials. We're also then using AI for creating, so if you've got a set of course outcomes or learning outcomes, how do you then get back and, oh, there we go. How do you then get back and use that to generate course content? When you've got course content, how do you use AI to generate the actual lectures and course materials? Assessments, translations, every single aspect of training, we can actually do this. And yeah, so the other thing we're using it for is how to assess whether somebody is the right person for a course. Africa CDC and us, so we get sometimes over sort of 2,000-3,000 applications for a course. I know you don't want to go through 2,000 applications. So we're actually working on a tool that will say, well, what is their job description? How does that match the learning outcomes or the competencies from the course? How does this match the gaps that they have in order to be able to do their jobs? And so we're trying to build some tools to be able to put all that information in and say, of all of these 1,000 applications, these are the people who would benefit the most from this course and are most matched to the criteria for the course. And we're using the same kind of criteria then to be able to develop learning paths. And I know this has been done already, so we're not going to try and reinvent the wheel. If people have done this already, we will go and find those people and work with them. So we're moving very much to this, and we're building now a workflow on the website. So if you want to start a curriculum development from scratch, okay, here's the best AI tool because we're benchmarking all of them. This is why we chose this one, this is the best tool for this one. And it's going to be different for each of these steps, as we've already seen. As I said, even just for translation, that's different ones for different languages. So we're trying to build all this so we can actually provide a tool for people to start from scratch and end up with a curriculum, including training materials, assessments, and even marking of those assessments, and then determining who should be on that course that you've just developed. So in summary, yeah, training for public health is a little bit different to our training in academia. We have to think about the audience and their needs and their day-to-day jobs. We need the infrastructure, so they don't always have this, specifically in Africa, in low and middle income countries, they don't necessarily have the infrastructure, including the workflows. We wanted to standardize the training, so we've got this curriculum that's available, and we wanted to provide long-term support for these trainees. So the plan is to finish. Curriculum is never finished because the technologies change, everything changes. We want to be able to build this curriculum for AI because we want to be able for the public health institutes to be able to use AI for public health decision making. And then, of course, we've got the African Bioinformatics Institute. There was a poster today. And hopefully that's going to be able to take over and continue some of this training, the training activities, because this is cutting across academia, public health, industry, and all sectors. So I'd just like to acknowledge the funding from the Gates Foundation and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and then there are many people who we work with around the world, including many people in this room, on all our training. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. I don't think there's any time for questions, or maybe one?
One quick one.
One quick question.
I'm sorry, I just thought I have to run to give another presentation.
Thanks, Nikki. Great talk. I'm interested in the help desk and in you bringing online trainers and trainees together. Obvious incentives for the trainees. How do you encourage sustained engagement for the trainers to engage in that space outside of dedicated course time?
Yeah, so the trainers are often around to answer questions on Slack anyway, and then sort of, we kind of lose those answers. And because we've got a set of trainers all under the same category, and then we've got a little chat thing in the background for them to chat to each other, then it's not pressure on one person. There's a group of people who could answer. And so, and then that's why we've got the chatbot as well now, because now if none of them get to answer, we can still have, some AI generated answers. But because it's a community and they've all volunteered, we don't force them to enter this database. So yeah, so far it's going okay.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nikki.